I often wonder if the untold thousands who pass through Royal Deeside to Braemar every summer realise that they are on the edge of one of the biggest wilderness areas in Scotland, of lonely glens and high hills where nobody lives, lonelier today than it's ever been. Well, I'm in Glen Coich in the Braes of Mar, some of the highest country in Scotland, and I'm at the Earl of Mar's Punch Bowl. An amazing spot, a very lonely spot, but once it was the scene of a great gathering of hunters. Now this was supposed to be a party hunting the deer. They weren't going to hunt deer. They were going to win a crown for the Stuart King James VIII, because they were fed up with the Union of Parliaments and they wanted a Scottish Parliament back again. And this is where the Jacobite Rising of 1715 took place. Now, all sorts of events happened after that which changed the face of Deeside. And the Royal Deeside that everybody knows is not the real Deeside. The real Deeside begins away up in the Cairngorm. This is the real Deeside. High green flats along the haughs of the river and its tributaries. This is where most of the clansmen lived who owed allegiance to the Earl of Mar. If they were called out, they had to gather and fight, regardless of who they were fighting. We have records of two Mar men, John Simon and John Stewart, who were told to report tomorrow or we'll visit to burn your corn and drive away your cattle. Well, the Mar men knew about lifting cattle because they were great cattle lifters themselves, and that may be one of the reasons why soldiers were sent to keep the peace. This place, known as the Dubrach, is remembered because of the murder of a soldier following the failure of the Second Jacobite Rising. The man who was murdered, Sergeant Davis, was apparently very popular with the locals, and then one day he went on missing. Time passed, 6 months, and then a hat was found, and then the body of the murdered man. But the man who found the body, he didn't know whether he should report it or not because he was frightened there might be reprisals. And then the idea came to him. He made up the story of a ghostly visitation from Sergeant Davis telling him where his body was hidden and asking for decent burial. So the local man told the story to the military post at Braemar. 2 local men were apprehended for the murder, and the man who had had the ghostly visitation was taken to Edinburgh to give evidence. And during the course of his evidence, the prosecutor said, "Now, what language did Sergeant Davis speak to you in?" He said, "As good Gaelic as myself." And the case collapsed because Sergeant Davis was an Englishman. Only the greenery won from the heather and the rickle of ruins dotting them tell of these not-so-ancient times, of the men who tilled small plots of land near the limit of cultivation, who drove the hills on deer hunts, speared the salmon in the river, and turned out to fight if called upon. The first Jacobite Rising of 1715 was not too disastrous for them, because it was a total failure. It was different after Culloden, when the redcoats arrived to extract retribution. Estates were forfeited and the clan system was broken. And the money from forfeited estates was being used to build roads and bridges, adding to the military roads built between 1750 and 1754.
These roads stretched from Blair Gowrie right across the Cairn Well to Braemar, and then east to Balmoral and north by Cockbridge in the Lecht to the Spey at Inverness. But this is the limit of the public road north of Braemar. This is the Linn of Dee, a fierce waterfall and a favourite beauty spot with a car park nearby so that tourists can take a walk. Queen Victoria opened the bridge a few years after she and Prince Albert settled at Balmoral.
You could call this the Grand Canyon of the Dee, where the river has had to force its way through between narrow walls that are as close as 3 or 4 feet. But the pools are of an unknown depth. If you fell in there, you'd be lucky to come out. The poet Byron, when he was a boy, fell in here and was very nearly drowned. 1,200 feet above sea level, 65 miles from Aberdeen. The force of this river, although it maybe doesn't look very much, it's very considerable because the Dee rises 2,800 feet above this and drops that in a distance of 20 miles. This is where the Dee changes its character. On the other side, it becomes Royal Deeside. It starts to broaden out. Its course is flowing with all the variety that people expect of Deeside.
The Dee has room to expand now as it reaches down to the woods, which since the days of Malcolm Canmore 900 years ago have been a hunting ground of Scottish kings. This is one of the great regions for red deer, which of course are animals of the forest. The method of hunting them in the old days was to use hundreds of men to drive the deer to the hunters. So when the Earl of Mar called a hunting party together in Glencoich, nobody took it amiss. It was normal. Well, they might have taken it amiss if they'd noticed that 800 or so of the men gathered were all leading Jacobites. Rob Roy was there. And as they talked and planned, a pothole in the river was filled with anchors of aqua vitae, hot water added to make a punch, and then they drank a toast to the 1715 rising. Today, that bowl is still known as the Earl of Mar's Punch Bowl. And the glen is still a deer forest, but of a different kind. Unlike many parts of the Highlands, there was very little eviction and deliberate clearance to get rid of people and replace them with sheep or deer. Below the Linn of